Good evening and welcome to tonight's edition of The Probe. For the very first time since the inception of the Ghana Cocoa Board bills in 2002, there's been a default in payment of its 182-day bill. Not just that, there's been a unilateral rollover of the 940 million Ghana cedis of debt. An official response is yet to be provided by the Cocoa Board, the BOG, and the various banks, but Joy News has dug deep, and I have details of what happened and the outcome of an emergency meeting between the various parties involved. Don't forget, this is coming at a time there are already apprehensions over the domestic debt exchange program, with investors already reconsidering their portfolio mixes. If you're an individual or institutional investor, gather around and let's get some education as well as information on what the options are available to you. My guests tonight are Richard Kwame Frimpong. He's an investment consultant, executive director of the Financial Literacy Foundation Africa. I also have Bobby Bansin, he's a legal practitioner, lead partner, Robert Smith Law Group. I also have Dr. Ben Amwa, he's a senior lecturer, Finance Department of University of Ghana, also the executive director for Center for the Economic Finance and Inequality Studies, they call themselves CEFIX. And much later, Jojo Kobna, our features editor, Joy News, will join us to tell us the impact stories, some of them rather harrowing, on how the domestic debt exchange program will affect lives, families, and homes. I am Emefa Apau, and this is The Probe. I'll return with details shortly. Please stay. Welcome back. This is The Probe. We're live on the Joy News channel on Joy 99.7 FM. We're on myjoyonline.com and all our social media platforms. So we're expecting the BOG, that's the Bank of Ghana, the Ghana Cocoa Board, and the various banks to address the press and also, these investors and institutional bondholders on exactly what went wrong or what happened. But let's take a good look at this whole cocoa bill and the default, and of course, amidst the debt exchange crisis. So technically, cocoa bills, we are told, is the working capital for the Ghana Cocoa Board, apart from the cocoa loans that government secures for them. So one of such bonds were issued and was supposed to mature on Thursday, 19 January 2023. And the Central Securities Depository, that's the CSD, did the needful and honored payments to investors. But here's what we know. The bond was supposed to be sold at over 940 million cedis, but we are learning that it was a heavily undersubscribed option. It only raked in about 85 million cedis, which is problematic for the BOG. We are told also that banks take advantage of the cocoa bills and sell it as packages to their clients, which is mostly institutional investments or investors, instead of the original retail or individual investors. Well, this time, BOG decided not to finance with the high-powered money they previously used to offset such debts. The decision is because of the high inflation figures we've all seen. We are closing the year up about 54.1. And we are recording, and the fight is on. They are hoping to control inflation, so they don't want to print money for such purposes, which is a key driver of inflation. Well, the BOG then directed the CSD batch file, which automatically credits investors, which was actually pushed through on Thursday and was asked to be reversed. That's where it came in. And they ordered a rollover for another 6 months. So that's where people got the alert on Thursday that they had their monies maturing and they can get their coupons amongst others, but went in on Friday and were told something different. And it raised some altercations at the banks. So a meeting was held on Friday, a meeting that was held between the BOG, we had the managing directors of the various banks, and then also the affected banks. And after that long deliberation, it was decided that Cocoa Board should look for the funds and pay retail investors their worth. And that should be done by this week. Now, they are supposed to be looking for funds. They are to work with their balances, with their banks, since we are learning that Cocoa Board is projecting a good year for the company. But institutional cocoa bills or bondholders will have to endure the rollover for another 6 months. The team found out that if this is part of the domestic debt exchange program, they're saying that no, it is not. The answer is actually no, this is not part of the domestic exchange program. The cocoa bill is not a government of Ghana bond. So that's what we know so far, and we are waiting official communication from the bank. I'm sure you can see on the screen, we have the GOG that's included in the debt exchange. The SLA is included, the DACHI is included, but the cocoa bill, many of you are asking, we're told it's not included on this. So it's a good time to bring in my guest, but we await the GOG statement tomorrow. We are told that release will come to give us more detail. But this is what we are learning from our sources within the Bank of Ghana, that if you are an institutional investor, you would have to endure that rollover for the next 6 months. But for individuals, we are told that the Cocoa Board has been directed by the BOG to work their balances to get you your returns by close of week. But it remains to be seen what happens. Let me go on Zoom now and bring in our guest, Richard Kwame Frimpong, investment consultant, executive director of the Financial Literacy Foundation Africa, joining us via Zoom. Thank you so much for joining us. I also have Bobby Bansin, who's a legal practitioner, lead partner, Robert Smith Law Group, also via Zoom, and Dr. Ben Amoah is a senior lecturer, Finance Department, UG, executive director, Center for Economic Finance and Inequality Studies, CEFIX. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us here on tonight's edition of The Probe. So it's a good time to start with you, Mr. Richard, because you have been talking about it a bit since the story broke on Friday. Well, really, what's your reading of what actually is happening as we speak?
Right. Good evening, Jifa. And just to bring to speed, I'm currently the advisory board chair for financial literacy. There's an executive director already, so just to clarify. So far, the understanding I have is that a number of the people that have done the cocoa bill, whose maturity were due sometime last week, did not get to cash in, and that they have been rolled over. Now, if that is the case, I indicated last week that anybody who bought it as an individual should be calm first, and then just double check your CSD account. If you check your CSD account and the rollover is showing with the matured return or interest plus the rollover rate supposedly, then there should not be any panic. But then if you check your CSD and it is still not sitting in there, then there could be cause for worry. Now, listening to you, I hear that there is some acknowledgement of this instruction, and that Cocoa Board is being asked to make the payments that are due. I mean, if that is the case, then I think there is some remedy, and that is some good news there. Institutional bond holders would be a challenge, I must say. Already they are challenged with all that is going on with the debt exchange. And so if any of those also bought Cocoa Bill, and we are saying they would have to still hold for some time, it simply means there's going to be some liquidity challenges, and that is quite worrying, at least for now.
A lawyer in our midst as well who would tell us the legal implications, and then if that can just happen the way it did without prior notification and communication from the banks to these investors. But Dr. Amoah, really, there are concerns. This is happening at a time where we are in a domestic debt exchange. There's apprehension in the system already. Then this, of course, there's clarity that this is not part of the domestic debt exchange, but the larger impact on investment. As an investor, do we think that the environment is rife for such things to be happening at the time that is happening?
Thank you very much. And like Bradley said, this shouldn't have happened in the first place, because if you have followed the cocoa bills, it started all the way back in 2002. And from 2002, Cocoa Board, and of course with the assistance of Bank of Ghana, has been issuing these bills to the public as and when they need funds based on their forecasts and their cash flow position. So this has not happened where Cocoa Board will default. Technically, what has happened is a default, but the timing of this default, is what creates the concern and the tension that we have in the system. For almost about 6 months now, we have been talking about the debt to GDP position, debt to government revenue position, and how it has now become a debt exchange program. Mm-hmm. and we are still discussing the issues surrounding it. We have not resolved it. We have been told that T-bills, and this is the word, T-bills are not part. So that is fair. But the cocoa bill itself is a bill. It is 91 and 182. So that is a short-term fund for Cocoa Board, and then also for investors who desire to have short-term return. They see the cocoa bill, aside the T-bill, as an option to use to manage their liquidity position. That is if they want to invest for the short term. Mm-hmm. Now, strangely enough, we are not too clear about whether this whole decision is backed by or supported or being enforced as a result of the debt exchange program. I'm saying this because we have already been told that T-bill is not part. Mm-hmm. Official position, we don't know whether this particular move, and I want to say Cocoa Board because BOG never sold this bit. BOG sold it on behalf of Cocoa Board. So if there is any institution that you have to go for your money from, it is not BOG. You go to Cocoa Board for your money because it's Cocoa Board that issued this instrument. Mm. Now, we know Cocoa Board is also state-owned. So the issue then is, how do we resolve this in the midst of the debt exchange program? And how do we calm nerves so that the information that has gone into the market, the signal that this has transmitted onto the market in the midst of the debt exchange program will be successful at exonerating or separating this Cocoa Board bill default as a standalone default and not necessarily added to the already unclear charted part of the domestic debt exchange program. So clearly for investors, they are justified to be worried, most especially when we are yet to come to the end in terms of the final arrangement for the rollout of the debt exchange program. Every investor will, at this point in time, be worried. And I would like to say that in this case, Cocoa Board, BOG, and Ministry of Finance have not been able to communicate among themselves, and they have not been able to manage this particular incident. It shouldn't have happened in the first place, most especially looking at what is happening now. BOG, Cocoa Board, Ministry of Finance should have solved this and not passed on this signal to investors. Investors are going to interpret it from their perspective and how this will impact or the possible impact this will have on them. This is a bill, and that is where the interest is. This is a bill. And we have other bills in the system, Treasury bill. So clearly, it muddies the waters, and that is bringing much clarity to the current situation that we have.
Okay. Well, the issue about timing, I'm sure I'll go around the table on it again. But let me bring in Mr. Bobby Bansing. He's a legal practitioner, because the questions we are receiving is the issue about taking legitimately earned money out of people's account without their permission. Really, the legalities here. How legal is that? Am I able to sue the bank, the BOG, the Cocoa Board, like Dr. Ben Amoah is saying, amongst others? What options really are available to investors, both institutional and individuals in this case?
Good evening, MFI. Good evening to my fellow panelists and to your viewers and listeners. I think it's the first time I'm on your show, and so thank you very much.
Good to have you, Laura.
For having me. It's an interesting subject. And I would want to share this. Friday, I had a call from a friend who had purchased this particular cocoa, bond, as it were. Unfortunately for the bank, they credited his account, and then he took the money, same immediately. And then later, he received a call from the bank, there was an error. If you can bring back the money. Because we've received instructions from the Bank of Ghana not to pay it, but rather roll it over. And of course, I told the person that per the provisions of our Banking Act and the common law position on banking law, the relationship between the bank and the customer or the account holder is a contract. So the bank will only act on the instructions of the account holder. So if the account holder tells you that I have 5,000 cedis in my account, use it to purchase this cocoa bond. You debit the account accordingly. When the time is up for the refund or for you to be reimbursed with the interest, as it were, it comes back into that account. You can do whatever you want to do with that money once it is in your account. The bank cannot stop you from touching it. If they try to, that is a breach of the bank-customer relationship as accepted within our legal jurisprudence. Now, the other question is, okay, what if the money does not hit your account at all? Then your questions that you would have to raise would have to be with the cocoa board. Because in that instance, the bank at best worked as your agent, not the cocoa board's agent. Because the cocoa board was selling their product, you went to your bank and instructed the bank to purchase it on your behalf.
Okay.
So if the time for the maturity of the bill or the bond is up and you are not getting it, perhaps you can ask your bank to contact Cocoa Board for reasons why that is so, or contact Cocoa Board directly. But once the money hits your account, you cannot be stopped from withdrawing it. You cannot be stopped from touching it.
Okay, but here's the case. We are told that once it was debited, at least your friend was lucky that as soon as he was credited, he was able to withdraw that. I would want to hear more on that story, on how it's ending. But this is the case where most people say they were credited on Thursday. They went there on Friday, or once they received the alert that they had been credited, then they received another alert about the debiting and then the rolling over. So most people went there on Friday and they were not able to get access to it at all. But maybe you will finish the story with your friend. What then happens?
So
is he supposed to return the money?
No, of course he will not return the money. Okay. Legally, he has no obligation to. So the second part of where I was going was that once the money hits your account and you get the alert, the position of the law is that the bank does not have the right to withdraw the money unless it is money that is not due you. And so if I have an account with, let's say, Bank A, and then I'm expecting 5,000 cedis as maturity for my bond, the cocoa bond, and the 5,000 cedis hits my account, that is money due me by contract and by law. The bank doesn't have a right to debit my account without my consent. That position has been sacrosanct throughout our jurisprudence on banking. However, the opposite or the reverse, where money that is not due you. So, for example, MFA, you intended to debit Dr. Frimpong's account. And the difference between my account number and his account number is 2, the last digits.
Okay.
And by accident, you write my account number instead of his account number, and the money hits my account, then it is money that is not mine, that I wasn't expecting. And so it is an irregular credit in my account. And then if I take it knowing that I'm not expecting those funds, then I have, questions to answer with criminal procedure and even the banking relationship because it's no money. But this is an instance where this is your money you are expecting. Your bank has told you that the money is in your account. The bank cannot debit it without your consent. That position is sacred.
Okay.
And so, unfortunately for the banks that sent the alert out, and now they are sending another alert reversing that transfer, they would have questions to answer to their customers.
Okay.
The only defense I see them possibly trying to pull out is force majeure, which in this instance I think that will not hold.
Where is the force majeure here? Exactly. Where is the force majeure here?
Because they may say that, well, they are acting under the instructions of the regulator, which is the Bank of Ghana. But like Sir who spoke before me said, this transaction is between the bondholder and Cocoa Board. Bank of Ghana only served as a conduit. And so Bank of Ghana legally will not be able to stop the pay, particularly when the debt exchange program, which remember it's not as if it's by law.
It's
The debt
voluntary.
exchange program is not law, it's voluntary.
Yes.
So even with that one, you have a right to accept it or not, except that they are not telling us the consequences of if you do not accept it.
Okay.
How much more this particular product that we have been told is not part of this program. And so those persons that received the alert, I believe that they have a right of recourse to enforce the terms of their banking relationship with their bankers, except that as to whether it is practical under the circumstances is another question. But in terms of the law, my opinion is that once they received that monies in the account, the bank does not have the authority, by whatever stretch of legal engineering you come up with,
Even with the clear explicit directive from the Bank of Ghana for that rollover to be done, in spite of the fact that we didn't have permission. You say that even that does not hold, even from the regulator.
Because like Doc said, the Bank of Ghana is not a party technically to this transaction. They only acted as agents of COCOBOD.
Okay.
And so the fact that they are the regulators of the bank, and this exchange program more or less would have to be under their auspices, does not give them the authority, for example, to go into my account and say that. So for example, Bank of Ghana cannot say that, okay, because we are lacking dollars, if I have dollars in my account, they are going to instruct my bank to take the dollars out and replace it with cedis. They cannot do that. Our constitution guarantees rights to property as long as it is lawfully acquired. And so if I have acquired my property, and this bond is my right to property, it's my property that is mine.
Okay.
No person can take it from me except by law. That is what the constitution says. And so the Bank of Ghana does not have that authority.
Okay.
Unless they say, like I said, it's unlawful. I unlawfully acquired that money. So those are my opening.
Well, but we're waiting for the BOG to give us, and the COCOBOD as well, to give us some explanation. We are told tomorrow that will happen. So as an investor, individual investor, we are told for individual, the COCOBOD has been directed to make payments. So I would want to clear the legal hurdle, then we can look at the finance with my other guests on this, so that I can allow you be. What redress then do I have as an investor is the key question that people are asking. So do I wait and hear from the COCOBOD, or what do I do going forward tomorrow? Because many want their money to pay their bills, amongst others. We'll be hearing from a gentleman that we've been speaking to on Friday on this, who's affected by this. What redress really do we have as an investor? Mr. Bansing? It appears that I've just, the connection to Mr. Bansing that is not correct. Can you hear me?
I am here. I didn't know that question was addressed to me.
That was for you briefly, so we can wrap up on the legal aspect of all this.
Okay, so what rights does an investor have under these circumstances? Like I said, your cause of action would be one against the COCOBOD, because they are the ones that you entered into the transaction with. However, if the bank credited your account, then more or less you could say that, well, you have nothing to do with COCOBOD because the monies that you were expecting was actually paid to you into your account. And if the bank, without your consent, debited the account, then you can go after the bank and then ask, why did you debit my account without my consent?
Okay.
The bank may, under the circumstances, lawyers would say that bring third-party proceedings to bring in either the Bank of Ghana or the COCOBOD to defend them or to indemnify them against the liability, because whatever they did was under the instructions of COCOBOD. But at the end of the day, it is your money and it is your property.
Okay.
Once you have lawfully acquired it and you had an agreement with COCOBOD for it to be paid at a certain date, COCOBOD or the Bank of Ghana cannot unilaterally decide to change the terms of that original contract without your consent.
Okay. Lawyer Bansing, we are grateful. We are grateful for your time, Lawyer Bobby Bansing there, giving us expert legal advice on this. But let me bring in a leading member of the Finance Committee of Parliament also on this, Mr. Kweku Riketigan. He's also an investment person. So let's see what Parliament is also thinking, the thoughts of them on this particular issue. You've been out of town, but I'm sure you've been in touch also on all that is happening amidst the debt exchange program. We've been hit also with this cocoa bills issue and the default, and we've been hearing from some investors on this. Really, I know Parliament is on recess, but as a committee, I'm sure you're still in touch on this. What really is your thinking on everything that is happening at the timing of this, amongst others? Are you concerned?
Good evening, and good evening to my fellow panel members. Yes, you're right. I've been out of town, but things are moving so fluidly in this country on this debt exchange that if you blink, you miss something. And it's amazing where we are traveling with this whole debt exchange thing. Now, the story with this, what we call cocoa bills, it's been around for a while. There are two instruments or two loans that the Cocoa Board agreed with, obviously, government to be able to do this borrowing on their own balance sheet and ring-fence their own revenues to pay for it. One of them is to do with the cocoa syndicated loans, which they take almost every year, around about November. It used to be around 1 billion to 1.5 billion, basically to purchase the cocoa. Now, this cocoa bills came into force when there were some operational losses, and that Cocoa Board now came up with this idea of raising short-term instrument. And when we say short-term instrument, treasury bills fall in that category. I mean, when you say short-term instrument, you're talking about anything up to 1 year. And then when you talk about the actual bonds, which are participating in this debt exchange, are things beyond 1 year. So technically, this should be exempted from the debt program or the debt operation that is being looked at the moment. So the idea that they have rolled them over and to give the impression that as if they are part of the debt exchange that they talked about, where they have given a date for things to be rolled over or put into new bond, it's really been defeated by this exercise, because this cocoa bills should not be part of that debt exchange. Also, until 2016, government had the Cocoa Board had only gone up to 1 billion Ghana cedis. That is in terms of the short-term borrowing that they've done up to when NDC government was in power. From the 1 billion in 2016 to date, this amount has been escalating from 1 billion now to where we are, which is 14 billion, which means that we've had operational losses at Cocoa Board in that astronomical, order up until now, and nobody knows exactly what is going on. Now, to come to a point where it has happened that they have basically defaulted, that is what it is. Rolling them over without discussions with the investor is basically a default. Now, when a bond or a treasury bill matures, it has a date, and it is the prerogative of the investor to decide to roll treasury bills or bonds over. It is not the issuer of the bond who decide on that. If the issuer decides that he's going to roll a bond that you have taken over, that is basically a default, especially without any discussion with you. And that is where we are at the moment. It looks as if that they were rolled it over for another 6 months. My understanding, information I have received is that now the maturity date is the 21st of July, which is basically 6 months after the 21st of January, when they were supposed to pay this, and they put a yield of, it doesn't matter what the yield is. The government has basically defaulted. They rolled this bill or short-term instrument over without the authorization of the investor. And that is illegal. And look, this government and this finance minister is basically doing what they like without any law in the country basically challenging them. We've been talking and talking. This is people's livelihood we are talking about here. People are depending on these monies to pay many things. With the hardship that we are going through in this country at the moment, when you pass left the story is bad. When you pass right, it is worse. When you go to the center, you can't comprehend. We are living in a banana republic where the finance minister decides to do what he likes with basically people's money. In something that this finance minister and this government got themselves into when they became trigger happy with borrowing. And the people who are to pay for it are people who basically have nothing to do with the mess that this government has created. And then they talk about being patriotic, helping Ghana to get out of this. You create a mess and you ask me to come and help you to get out of that mess. Look, this is unbelievable. I mean, it is clear that this government, this country is bankrupt. It is clear that we are insolvent. Even the institutions that we thought had a better credit rating, and an institution that had a better credit rating than the sovereign itself is Cocoa Board. Because anytime they take their syndicated loan of $1 billion and over, they are able to pay back. Anytime they take the cocoa bills, they are able to pay back. Therefore, in rating terms, they have a better ratings than the country. So if now we know that the ratings of this country is basically gone down the drain. So if the very institutions that people could have a glimpse of hope in basically putting your money and getting it back also turns this way, then where do we go?
Okay.
The reason why we invest in government bonds, or people are encouraged, and especially pension fund managers and investors will tell you that the reason why, especially with pensions, that they are encouraged to buy government bonds is, well, government bonds are believed to be risk-free or very little risk, and that when you put your money there, it is better than buying a hedge fund or private equity, which the returns could be high, but the risks will also be high.
Okay, well, the clarity, the clarification, Mr. Rikitigan, that we've been getting is that they insist that this is not part of the domestic debt exchange program. This is a Cocoa Board situation. They are hoping to give us further clarity starting tomorrow. But let me bring in Mr. Kweku Frimpong on this. Let's take a look at the potential threat when we talk about investment, the potential threat, and largely for the finance and the banking sector, because we are dealing with the domestic debt exchange. We are not done. There's a lot of apprehension in the system. Now this is coming up. We are told treasury bills will not be touched, but we are seeing cocoa bills and this unilateral rollover. What impact really, what does it portend for the investment sector and the banking sector, I should say?
Right, Jiva. So, MFA, so I think that we need to just clarify for the ordinary person who is watching. Like I think Honorable said, there is a distinction between a bill and a bond. And first and foremost, cocoa bill is not necessarily treasury bill, most importantly. And so if you have cocoa bill, we are discussing the challenges the refund request and maturity request are bringing, but it's not the same as treasury bill. So if treasury bills are exempted, so to speak, then we shouldn't translate that to mean the potential default on this cocoa bill means if you have a treasury bill, is going to experience the same thing. So that clarity must be there so that you are calm in case you are holding treasury bills. Yeah. And then secondly, this is literally, even though Cocoa Board is a government and SOE, literally, it's also not a government kind of instrument. It's not a government debt instrument, even though Cocoa Board is a state entity. And so it is almost like a debt instrument that Cocoa Board underwrites. Mm-hmm. And because it's a bill, it's either 91 day or 182 day. What this is going to pose going into the future is a challenge of holding the entire financial ecosystem together. You know, Ghana has come a very long way with getting people to appreciate the culture of savings and investments. And many people believed, at least by now, that if for nothing at all, if I bought anything that was a fixed term instrument from, say, an SOE like this instance of a cocoa bill, or if I bought a treasury bill, or even if I bought a bond, it is an instrument that is having a near zero risk. And so if now that cannot be safe, if I decided to take some risk with some banks before, some savings and loan before, and I bought their fixed deposit, and it didn't work. It was not successful, and I lost it through the banking crisis. And if I even went further to be more risk interested, and I bought, say, a men's gold, or I did some other thing that turned out to be a Ponzi in quotes. And now I decided to make another attempt after all the losses to now get some more security. And just as the textbook described, to now even buy something that would give me some regular income and at the same time give me some guarantees in terms of not losing them. And now that is also becoming a challenge. And the gap is going to create for the culture of investment is going to be difficult. And now almost everybody, if you hear people say it's even risky to put money in the bank, that is going to become a bit more challenging for even the country going into the future. And I think two things must happen with all the regulators in the four anchors of our financial ecosystem: the banking industry, which is the Bank of Ghana, the insurance industry, which is the NIC, the pensions, which is NPRA, and then the investments arm, which is the Securities and Exchange Commission, should team up and come with a coordinated communication and a coordinated working plan that can salvage the difficulties that the entire ecosystem is facing, and to really let communication flow to get people to appreciate what is happening so that there is some level of understanding. If that doesn't happen and rumor fills the lacuna that has been created, there will be rush, there will be capital flight, and every other of these four anchors is going to be challenged. The whole economy thrives on this ecosystem. And if we delay further, we are going to have a lot of issues on our hands. And so we should separate the debt exchange program, even though it has some consequences from what is happening on the cocoa board bills. And all the regulators must team up now to come up with a coordinated kind of communication to get everybody to appreciate what is happening and how, in the midst of these, we can handle the culture of savings and investments.
Well, Dr. Amoah, in all this, though, the handling, the posturing of those who are supposed to be calming nerves, I'm sure you've seen the talks underway with the domestic debt exchange, and then this is happening. We are yet to get an official communication, at least to investors. We are told that will happen tomorrow. But the posturing in all this, in our handling of the whole situation, because we've heard people say that now it's like it's not safe to even invest or put your monies in the banks. It's better you keep it at home, amongst others. I'm sure you've heard people say this. How then, going forward, should we be handling this situation such that it does not get out of hand?
Okay. It's about assurance, and it is about being transparent with investors, or what I call the players within the industry. Like Dr. Frimpong said, if there are gaps in information flow, then again we have sudden and unexpected happenings like what happened to the cocoa bill. Then, rational as investors are or market participants are in this space, they begin to take positions, and the position will be how best will they protect their interest. So going forward, we need to be more open in terms of the managers of the economy and those who matter as far as this particular restructuring of the financial space is concerned. Because truth be told, the financial institutions industry has suffered a lot within the past 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
We started from DKM. From DKM, we came through men's gold. From men's gold, we had to go to the banking sector cleanup. We are not out of the woods yet, and then we are having the biggest of all of them, debt exchange program. And look at the amount we are talking about, over 130 billion being restructured to the extent that for a whole year, investors are not going to be paid any interest on their coupon, so their bond investment. Clearly, if you are somebody who uses the financial services sector as a channel for wealth creation, if this is how you want to create your wealth, you'll be having another thought of the idea. So the managers, like Dr. Daigin said, on the issue of pensions through banking, insurance, and the wealth management aspect, that the Securities and Exchange Commission we must be clear, we must have a coordinated approach in solving this.
Okay.
Back to the cocoa bill issue. In fact, 8 bills are expected to mature this year. 8. The total of it is about 8 billion. Not to count the interest. We are just talking about the maturity, but just 8 billion. Again, if you go to that, realize that on the 3rd of February, 1.1 billion is expected to mature. Mm-hmm. On the 23rd of February, we're talking about 2.3 billion. So if you add it up, 8 of them, by 25th of May, if you look at the schedule, by 25th of May, 8, you can tell them 8 series of this cocoa bill will have to be what? Paid by Cocoa Board. We don't know what this unannounced, or what I'll call this unilateral rollover, means for the other yet to be paid instrument or bills. Okay. This is a big issue that I think that there must be clarity. Whatever information will come out tomorrow, I believe that it should be more of Cocoa Board coming out to assure the public, because the instrument was sold by Cocoa Board, not BOG.
Okay.
BOG just provided the banking aspect in terms of the account holding aspect of the transaction. Mm-hmm. But the instrument was sold by Cocoa Board. So Cocoa Board, I don't know whether it's going to be a joint release by BOG and Cocoa Board, but whatever be the case, Cocoa Board should be able to assure investors so that investors could be interested in the bill, and they can patiently wait for this bill to mature. If not, we are going to assume that it's part of the debt exchange program. Again, within the debt exchange program, if you don't handle it very well, indigenous financial institutions are most likely not to survive. Because where will they get support from to deal with some of these liquidity issues? Indigenous financial institutions will struggle to survive. The next thing we need to also think about is that confidence within the space is an all-time low.
Is it dwindling? Okay.
So many years.
Okay.
It's going to take so many years for us to build that level of confidence that we have lost as a result of these 10 years of negativity that has, erupted around our financial services space. Then, of course, we can talk about the fact that we need to protect indigenous businesses within the space, most especially the financial institutions, because as for the multinationals, some way, somehow, they may be able to survive. But the indigenous ones, if we want to build a financial services sector that has indigenous players, then we should find a way of providing some form of support. So that after we get out of the debt restructuring, we will not sacrifice them. We will help them.
Okay. Well, we've heard the insurers also mention that they could collapse under this, but it's a good time.
Can I make a correction? Can I correct something that
that's Mr. Hagan?
Yeah, that Dr. Frimpong said.
Briefly.
I just want to clarify. Yeah, I just want to clarify.
Briefly.
We shouldn't give the government a leeway by these technicalities of what is a treasury bill and what is that. When they were composing what the debt should be, in terms of what is going to participate in the debt restructuring or the debt, the 137 billion that they were looking at as the bulk of the bond includes central government bond and the Dachi bond and the ESLA bond. These bonds are technically corporate bonds, but they are contingent liability on government. The same with this, what is it called? This one we are talking about. Cocoa bills are treasury. You will say they are corporate treasury, corporate bills, not corporate treasury. But they are contingent. They have contingent liability on government.
But the clarity he was bringing, the clarity, Mr. Hagan, he was bringing was the fact that treasury bills are not part of this, and then also the cocoa bills are also not part of the debt exchange program.
The treasury bill was used to stand in for short-term instrument. That's basically when you put all the numbers together. As I'm telling you, 137 billion bonds were included. This includes Dachi bond. You will say that the Dachi bond are not government bonds. Therefore, they should not be incorporated because they are actually corporate bonds on Get Fund. You will say ASLA should not be included because they are energy sector bonds, and therefore they are a corporate bond of some sort. But because they have contingent liability on government, that is why these have been included. Of course, when the pension funds were being excluded, all the pension fund investment in Deutsche Bond and ESLA are also taken up. But the component bought by individual investors are still included. Therefore, these ones are exempted as part of short-term instrument.
But in going forward, way forward is really the concern. Now we'll be telling some impact stories and hearing how this is impacting people and their lives, amongst others. And I know as you resume, this will be one of the key issues on the front burner for your committee. But in the coming days, how are you hoping, briefly under a minute, that this situation should be handled by government, Cocoa Board, BOG, and the various parties, so we can wrap up on this and hear from my colleague Jojo Kobina as well?
Well, the fact of the matter is that, the government is basically gone bankrupt. We can't pay our debt, whether they are corporate debt or they are central government debt or they are debt that are corporate in nature but contingent, have a contingent liability of government. And until we sort that issue out, this whole debt thing that is going on, the debt operation, is going down the drain gradually. The government is not talking to people who are involved in this. The government is not seeking advice. The government is making unilateral decisions. And until they reverse doing all these things and stop the stance that they have taken, basically to try and bully people who have lent them money, we are not going to go anywhere. And invariably, what is going to happen is that if we are not able to get a debt exchange program, and we continue to default, then we wouldn't be able to get a program under the IMF. It is absolutely impossible that Ghana will get IMF funding before the first half of the year, unless, of course, they bend the rules at Washington to try and give us some money to survive.
Okay, we're grateful. That's George Kweku Riketegan. He's a member of Parliament's Finance Committee. I also had Richard Kwame Frimpong. He's an investment consultant, also with Financial Literacy Foundation Africa. We also had Bobby Bansing. He's a legal practitioner, lead partner, Robert Smith Law Group, and then also Dr. Ben Amwa, senior lecturer, Finance Department, University of Ghana. He's also the executive director of the Center for Economic Finance and Inequality Studies, CEFIX. Thank you so much for your time, gentlemen, here on tonight's edition of The Probe. It's time for me to bring in my colleague Jojo Kobina. He's been telling a lot of impact stories, interacting with 84-year-old, 77-year-old, and it's a bond of sorrow. That's how we've captioned it. We've been bringing it to you the whole week, and we'll take some of these stories right here on The Probe right after this break. Please don't go anywhere.
That now we are not going to get any coupon or any interest until 2027, before they'll give you 5% of your capital. I said, wow, 77-year-old. Now, how many years? That's 5 years or 4 years before 77. How long has God given me?
Peter Kojo is 77. Currently, his blood pressure is rising due to an investment that was meant to make him smile.
So just a bit of Mr. Nyasape's case, his story, one of the stories that Jojo Kobina has been telling as part of our Bonds of Sorrow series. And Jojo, how many of such have you, or persons like this have you spoken to so far?
We've spoken to 4 people,
okay.
4 different people. And their stories are very different, and they also have different backgrounds. Mm-hmm. We've spoken with the very first person, Roberta. Mm-hmm. Roberta took a very early retirement. 5 children. And then decided, oh, you know what? I'm tired of working. I think there's a time I just want to invest, and then while I plan my future. And then this happens to her. And so, I mean, she's very unhappy. Mm-hmm. And then we have another 65-year-old man who is also very unhappy because, I mean, he's on retirement, and that is the money that he's supposed to, he would use to enjoy his, old age after working so many years. There's a policeman too who pushed all his money into, when he went to retirement. Yes, okay, he was very excited about it, and then he pushed his money into it, and he's also very confused. And then we have this 77-year-old marine worker, he used to go on the high seas. Now he's back, and he put all his money. First, he lost about 250,000 to a Ponzi scheme. This one really hit him. And we keep talking about debt exchange. It was when I sat down with these people that I really realized the impact of this particular thing and how devastating to be if they are included into the exchange. And I remember when I was talking to Kojonya Sefe, I told him, I'm not recording, you just relax, let's have a conversation. Then when we started, then I told him, okay, we can record, because he was so emotional that I told him to forget the camera, because it took me some time, because he was so emotional that I was actually very scared. I was like, I'm not the one who's supposed to. I don't want to trigger
because he has BP, he has diabetes.
He has prostate issues, and so when I looked at him, and he was very angry. He was the one who said, bring the medication. If you think that I'm joking.
These are all his medications.
Yes. I mean, he relies on a lot of medication to survive. He said, I take so many medications every morning when I wake up. So when I'm telling you that I need money for medication, I'm not joking. I'm not just appealing to the emotions of government and saying that I need these medications to survive. He said it's 77 years. I mean, so if it's extended, how many years has he got? How can he enjoy his money before he dies? And so that's a major concern to him. And I mean, and you know, even before the money, he had already planned. I mean, I saw the plan. He said, oh, well, when he takes his coupon, that would be on Monday. Tuesday, the money he was expecting the money. He's expecting money tomorrow. And on Tuesday, he would go and buy medication first, and then he would buy materials to reinforce his wall, because his wall was very weak. And so he said, oh, I need to reinforce my wall because the rains will come and it will come into my house, and so I need to do that, else when it breaks, it will be more money. So now he's confused, and that's the reason why he says he will go to the Ghana Commercial Bank. He will be there, and until they forcefully remove him from there, he would not go.
And you're going to follow up on this, because this Tuesday, Tuesday is when he's supposed to go to the bank.
Yes, and he said,
and hopefully get.
That is exactly what he's going to do, because he said, well, if I have extra money, he said, I have children, yes, but the children live with me. They're in my house. I still take care of my children, and so I still need the money. And and the thing is, he didn't just buy one. He bought government bonds, many of them, and he spread them across. And one of the bonds was supposed to mature in March.
Okay.
That's where he's going to get his, full money. And so, he was actually looking forward to it.
After all, he's worked all these years, he had to enjoy. And this is the time that this is happening. So I'm sure he had a message as to what exactly he wants to see happen. His money should not be touched. Exemption is what he's asking for.
And he made a very passionate appeal to the president, that the president was also 77 years old, interestingly. And so he should look at him, their mates, and listen to his plea and exempt them from it. Else, that would mean that he can't survive.
But how is Roberta coping? I'm particularly also interested in her case. 5 children, and she was hoping that this was a time for her to rest.
I saw her in the children.
How is she going to pay for her fees?
And that was it. That is the same thing. She said, look, Jojo, she took me around the house. She said, people say that bondholders are very rich people. Look at my house. Do I look like I'm wealthy? Do I look like I have a lot of money? The only reason why I did this investment was because I took an early exit, and I decided that, you know what, for me to eat and survive, I'll do this. So she's still contemplating, what to do. Now she's now thinking of going back into the world of work again. And now, but finding job is also will be a very difficult one. So she's very desperate, and that's the reason why she's asking the president that, no, please don't touch my money. Make sure that I'll get my coupons, and then you exempt me, so that our lives will continue the way we had planned it. And
she's particularly part of the Individual Bondholders Forum, amongst others. I know they've been holding forums today, they've been engaging government, but are we telling more Bonds of Sorrow stories?
Oh yes, we have many more people. This week we have one that will be coming. Interestingly, there was this man who I called because I wanted to interview him, and then he said, my blood pressure is up, and so they're driving me to the hospital. And so when it comes down a little, I'll call you. And so later on, I called him to find out whether he was okay. He said, well, he's been admitted, and they're observing him. And so he said he's thinking about how to pay workers, how to pay, because he's also an entrepreneur, and I mean he's done many investments and he's looking forward. So he's very confused. And these are people who really rely on these bonds, and have been relying on these bonds for survival. And so this debt exchange program will really affect them, and government really should listen to them. I mean, they should come to an agreement, and something will happen else, because it's about people, and the people decide to put their money into it. And virtually all the 4 people that I spoke to, many of them are saying, when I get my money, I'm not going to invest in bonds again.
No more.
And that is really distressing, because, I mean, what should government be doing at this time? I think government should really be sitting down and looking at ways of, I mean, making sure that all these investors, people would still keep their money. They might say, hey, I would just buy dollars and I'll keep it, or I'd rather save at home. And these are the things that I think the president should be listening to, the finance minister should be listening to, else it would really distract.
That's Features Editor Jojo Kobna. Thank you so much for bringing us this real stories about how this will impact families and lives. We are grateful. Thank you so much. And look out for it. We have more of Bonds of Sorrow stories. I am Emefa Apau, and this has been The Probe. A Walk with Jesus is up next for our radio audience. Another edition comes your way, same time. Have a good evening.